let's move on to the few theoretical points related to the float property. This property is set by default to none to every element, but we can change it to left or right. When we do this, the element with this value will float to the top right or top left edge of its parent and will be floated by other elements. Usually we set our float property to left, so I will often refer to it as float left. We can use the float property to do several things. First of all, we use the float property to create the website layouts. If we want to place two columns side by side on our website, the float property is great for this. Thanks to it, we can arrange two block elements next to each other without the negative effect as in the case of the display inline block property. Of course, the float property has also its drawbacks, but I will talk about them later. We can also use the float property to create a menu on our website. We can assign this property to every element of our navigation as an alternative to display inline block. In the example, we can see the list items with the float left property assigned, thanks to which these items line up next to each other in one line. Another thing that we can use the float property for is working with the images on our website. If we have an img tag in our HTML code and a p tag below it, all we have to do is set the img tag to float left to make the p tag float around it. Because by default our p tag would place itself under our image, even though the image does not occupy the entire width of the website. This is how the block elements behave by default, and the float property allows us to change it. If we change the value to the right, we get the opposite effect. Our image will be moved to the top right edge, and the text from the p tag will start floating around it from its left side. As you can see, the float property gives us completely new possibilities to use on our websites. We can also create the columns on our website using the float property. Thanks to this, we can arrange two block elements next to each other. In the previous example, only our image had the float left property. If we also give this property to our p tag and set the width of the elements so that they fit into the width of their parent, which may be the width of the entire website, we will get the following effect. Both elements will be lined up next to each other in one line, creating two columns. But the float property also has its problems. The first is that the parent cannot see the height of the children. Our navigation has inside some a tags with the property float left. Without the float left property, the parent of these elements, the nav tag, would expand with the children and have their height. However, when using the float left property, the parent cannot see the height of its children and it's 0 pixels high. Which brings us to the second problem, which is that the next element that should be under the container for the items with the float left property will go higher than it should if it finds a place for itself, because it refers to the height of the parent and not to the height of the elements with the float left property. Since our navigation has a height of 0, our main sees a place for itself next to our items in the navigation and tries to push in there. And it should be under our navigation, as you can see in the example on the right. In a moment, I will show you what the occurrence of these problems with the float left property looks like in practice and how to deal with solving these problems. So let's go down to writing some code.